Chair now recognizes Mr. Cloud from Texas.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, witnesses, for being here. I do want to thank you, Chairman, for hosting this committee. There cannot be a more important topic facing our country right now. Sun Tzu once said, if one party is at war with another and the other party does not realize it's at war, the party who knows it's at war almost always has the advantage and usually wins. And right now we find ourselves a place in our country where we have not acknowledged that China is in an unrestricted warfare against our country. And we know from unrestricted warfare that they say they use things like psychological warfare, smuggling, media, drug, network, technological warfare, fabrication warfare, resource warfare, economic aid warfare, in which we just continue to spend our money on things, cultural warfare, international law warfare, infrastructure, terrorism, chemical warfare, biological warfare. A number of these things we've seen already at work, or the beginning of them taking a foothold within our borders. And the whole idea of an unrestricted warfare, of course, is to take out our country without firing a shot. I found it very concerning, of course, last week when I was in a committee hearing with Secretary Mayorkas, our Homeland Security Secretary, that it was a term that he seemed puzzled by when I brought up unrestricted warfare and the need for us to do things like secure our borders to protect against it. When I go through this list, you can just, a number of these: smuggling, drug fair, chemical warfare, economic aid warfare, all affecting or involved in what's going on our southern border, not to mention all the potential terrorists that have come into our country. We know a number of single adult Chinese males are coming in, and you don't usually leave China without their permission, and so we have tens of thousands that have come in, and so we've got to really be careful about what's going on. But I was struck, Colonel Newsham, about something you said, because you said you mentioned the largest wealth transfer in history, and it reminded me of a 2008 U.S. National Intelligence Council report where it said this. It predicted this. The unprecedented shift in relative wealth and economic power roughly from the west to east is now underway and will continue. That report went on to say the United States' relative strength, even in the military realm, will decline and U.S. leverage will become more constrained. It went on to explain why. It said, in terms of size, speed, and directional flow, the transfer of global wealth and economic power is now underway, roughly from west to east, without precedent in modern history. So this is like never happened before. And it said it derives itself from two sources. One, we're sending oil and gas revenues overseas, and we're sending manufacturing overseas. And so I'm very concerned about the policies, and especially that this administration has embraced, that continue to do these things. Now, this has been happening over decades, but certainly we've seen kind of the pedal been put on the gas, or the foot been put on the gas pedal when it comes to this. Could you speak to what's happening in this transfer of wealth and political influence and dynamic going from east to west?
Yes, sir. It's, as you noted correctly, it's been going on for a long time. I used to work for Motorola, in fact, and I watched them commit suicide in China, and that was in the 90s into the 2000s. So it's going on a long time, but it's still going on. And there seems to be some sign that some industries and businessmen are waking up to the danger of putting your money into a system like that, plus the fact that they are out to kill us, putting it simply. And I say it really hasn't stopped. Energy is one particular area where it is baffling that we are giving up that advantage. And the Chinese are taking advantage of it. Other enemies are as well. But also mentioned earlier was the so-called green technologies. Well, China stole the technologies for those. They started manufacturing them in China, and with illegal subsidies, et cetera, can now dump them onto the world markets like the U.S. And now, even better, they have U.S. solar companies lobbying Congress not to crack down on Chinese illegal trade activities and stolen technology because they're getting cheap stuff from China. It's a win-win from China's perspective. But it hasn't stopped. There's some signs we're waking up, but it's unfortunately we're not near where we need to be.
Now, one of the things you'll hear China talk about, they're very out there, along with Russia and Iran and other countries, about working to create a multipolar world. In other words, to bring the United States down from our superpower influence. In 2018, I think it was July 22nd, Biden said in a speech as vice president, he said, we are trying to create a multipolar world. And so it concerns me that we have somebody in the White House right now who doesn't share the objective that most of us have of a strong U.S. presence that remains a city on the hill for the world. And then we have somebody in the White House who has these objectives at play. I wanted to see if you could speak to one other thing. Alexander Solzhenitsyn said, "To destroy a people, you must first sever their roots." And so we see an ideology in many of our institutions, specifically our learning institutions, to kind of rewrite American history, to get people to not appreciate our founders and sometimes just frankly ignore our U.S. history, when for the imperfect country we are, every country is, we've been a tremendous positive influence in the world. Could you speak to what you've seen happening in our universities?
Well, it's not acceptable thought to consider America a good, decent nation. And that's unfortunately how it's turned out. And that is, you can imagine what the damage is there. The idea that we've seen in things like the 1619 Project, that America is fundamentally evil, well, that you can see how that plays out. I would note that America has an illegal immigration problem. China does not, and that tells you a lot.